To our next round of presenters. First, we have with us Teresa Almeida. Welcome. Thank you for being with us. You have 7 minutes, and you may begin your presentation by stating your name for the record.
Thank you. My name is Teresa Almeida, and I am here to give you my perspective on the bill and our rights. I moved to Canada 20 years ago, and I have been a single mother of my two boys for over 15 years.
Hear you. Ms. Almeida, we can't hear you.
Sorry. Skipping small luxuries such as new phones, car, gadgets, and even eating out. I actually did not own a car until 6 months ago. Instead of renting, I decided to buy a small house for my family. And through great sacrifices over the years, I have been fortunate enough to invest in real estate, and I am now a small landlord with 4 properties, including my primary home and 4 mortgages, which is a big responsibility. Here I am. You see me. I am not a big investor. I am not a big landlord with bags full of money in my bedroom. I do not live in a mansion, but rather a modest home that needs constant repairs. My older son is a tenant himself. The risk of investing in real estate in Ontario has increased to the point where many are doubting whether this is something we are able to continue to do. Do not get me wrong. I am blessed to have great, responsible, and generous tenants. Isn't it a matter of time, though? Isn't it just a waiting game until someone decides to destroy my hard work and I will have no recourse? Or maybe they will decide not to pay and the government will allow them to stay in my property for maybe over a year. Or maybe, well, I drown in debt without the ability to pay for mortgages. Under the current act, they are protected due to the Landlord and Tenant Board's backlog and administration delays or credit card errors. To the community, I should have saved enough, or I should have never gotten into the business. These behaviors are something to be expected and accepted without complaints. In the current climate, you are protecting small commercial businesses in the province, but you are also allowing movements such as Keep Your Rent and Rent a Strike to continue to hurt small landlords. We are a small business. At the end of the day, I am here as one of many mom and pop businesses. In my own experience over the years and hearing from fellow small landlords, the tenants who do not pay for that long are mostly taking advantage of our broken system. I've worked with many tenants, from new immigrants, low income, people who have lost their jobs. And I can tell you, in their worst economic situation, they have never chosen not to pay. We have worked out payment plans. I have waived rent. I've provided paid maintenance jobs to help them out. These responsible tenants find ways to communicate with the landlords and work together to reach a win-win solution. These tenants take great pride in their homes, and it shows. Good landlords want to keep these good tenants. Good landlords do not want to contribute to the homelessness rates in our cities. Good landlords are not heartless. We want to help those in true need. That single mother that just lost her job, that senior person living alone and unable to go out to buy his food. We want to help. We just need to be able to get rent because our banks do not wait for us. There is no grace period for our bills. There are no adjudicators or mediation services if we don't have the funds to cover our mortgages. No, they do not wait a year or more. They act a lot faster than this, and they usually destroy our credit ratings and ability to borrow for years to come. While evictions are scary during a pandemic, I urge you to remember that people who already had an eviction order or a hearing date are people who already did not pay for months prior to the pandemic and who took advantage of this situation to stay further without any consequences and without paying rent despite having a job or receiving CERB. Bill 184 increases fines for landlords. However, the bad tenants who fraud our system do not have any penalties, and landlords are expected to absorb the loss. People who got affected by the pandemic will not get evicted, not anytime soon, even with the changes with Bill 184. In fact, I believe that by allowing to have a mediation in lieu of a hearing, it will free the adjudicators' time so that they can respond to filings by tenants who may be in great need of maintenance or repairs. Tenants who faced financial hardships can work a repayment plan with the landlords if they haven't already. There is no doubt there are bad landlords. Small landlords are being punished by the deeds of bad landlords, big or small. We are punished for looking to have a stable form of investment for our children's and our family's future. Now, add the social pressure, add the lack of privacy and unfairness of our law. I invite you to attend a hearing at the Landlord and Tenant Board. add the mental anguish that we all go through because social media paints us as horrible, greedy landlords. Add the fact that tenants groups can easily post invasive pictures, come to our homes, tell the world our private lives because we charge rent, because we signed a contract where we provide a service and we expect to be paid. When you are hurting small landlords, you are hurting small businesses, no different than your favorite family-owned restaurant at the corner of your street. We are the backbone of the rental industry. We cover over 50% of the existing rental market. Equally important, you're hurting good tenants. I'll tell you why. When a landlord lost a whole year's worth of rent or thousands of dollars because of damages, that money and added risk needs to be recouped. The next tenant will pay a premium now because we have to save extra due to this added risk. It is no longer enough to just cover our mortgage and our expenses. Now we have to be able to increase the rent because of the many risks associated with having to hire paralegals, months of non-payment, renovations after damages, and so on. And remember, we can't get our property back. My hope is that Bill 184 helps streamline the hearings of non-payment of rent. Though this bill is not ideal and still punishes landlords, it can be seen as a positive step for both good landlords and good tenants. Maintenance issues are used and widely encouraged as a delay tactic at hearings. By asking the tenant to provide any relevant information prior to the hearing, it will allow the adjudicator to be prepared and focus on the items at hand. To conclude, if there is something that you will get out of this presentation today, if you will only remember one thing, please remember, we are humans that also need protection. All we small landlords did wrong was to grab control of our lives, our finances, and our retirement plans using real estate as a vehicle. This came at great sacrifice. We need you to work with us and tenants to bring real fairness to the landlord and tenant board. Thank you for the opportunity to express my opinion.
Thank you very much, Ms. Almeida. Now we will go to our first round of questioning, and we will start with the government side. MPP Gill, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also want to thank our presenters for taking the time and appearing before the committee. This is obviously important work. I think we need to hear from as many Ontarians, landlords, tenants, and other stakeholders to make sure that the piece of legislation that's before us is the best piece of legislation that we can make it to be. I'm going to ask my question to Teresa. Teresa, obviously you described yourself as a small landlord. I'm just thinking, for the benefit of the committee, would you be able to share with the committee in terms of, you know, how many units are we talking about? If you can just kind of share us with the committee and give us an idea.
Sure. So it will be a total of 8 units, not counting my personal home. My personal home is also a legal duplex, and I live in 1 unit with my son, and I also rent out the basement apartment.
And where are 8 of these units located roughly?
Sure. 2 properties are in Toronto, 1 in Oshawa, and 1 in Peterborough.
Thank you.
The one in Peterborough has 4 units.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. I think it kind of gives us an understanding in terms of, you know, what we're dealing with, and I agree with, you know, the point that you made. You're obviously no different than a small business owner that is out there, especially during these challenging times, trying to make ends meet. And it was partially also unfortunate, but I think over the last couple of days, we've had a number of small landlords appear before the committee that also, you know, feel somewhat frustrated. Some even talked about getting out of the business and selling their units altogether with the frustration that they're also facing. Not to say that the frustration is only on the landlord side. I mean, it's clearly understandable, and I think we can all agree that there are lots of good landlords and there are lots of good tenants, but there are also bad landlords, unfortunately, then there are also bad tenants. And our intention is to turn this piece of legislation into a legislation that is fair for both sides. And I think that's obviously the intent of this piece of legislation. I'm wondering if you can share with the committee in terms of some of the key challenges that you feel that are confronting small landlords in Ontario, and some of the items in this Bill 184 that might address some of those.
To be honest, the main challenge that I believe that we are facing is the long waits at the Landlord and Tenant Board. And when I mentioned during my presentation that I was inviting you to go, I really do. I've gone a couple of times just for research, just to learn, because I want to be a better landlord. And I felt crushed. The way the landlords are treated, it's unbelievable. And the problem is, if we look at the stats, I believe it's over 70% of, or over 80% of applications at the Landlord and Tenant Board are for non-payment of rent. And remember, and you can, even before the pandemic, we were having waits anywhere from, if you were in a luckiest town, you were waiting 2 months. If you were in Toronto or the Durham region, you may be waiting 6 months. That's 6 months of non-payment of rent. You go to the hearing, you wait the entire day, you have to take a day off from work, and that goes for both tenant and the landlord. And then you can get your application thrown out because you made a spelling mistake, because you wrote the 1 day too soon or 1 day too late. Any mistake is punishable for the landlord. And then we start all over again. But honestly, when I see sometimes tenants, and I've helped tenants that are really having, like, they're going through really tough times because their apartments are terrible or because the landlords are bad. But it's such a frustration because they have to wait a long time to get heard as well. So by streamlining the non-payment process, we're giving that room for other issues to be heard. We're giving room for the tenants to be heard more, to be able to fight illegal evictions, to be able to come and have their time at the Landlord and Tenant Board. And that is what I'm hoping. And I have really big hopes that Bill 184 can help us with, by having that moment of mediation before and sort of relieving the backlog that we have at the Landlord and Tenant Board. And to be honest, if we were to pick, we don't ask for much. If we were to pick as landlords, as a small landlords, even one thing that can help us, it will be that. Help us get bad tenants out so that we can put good tenants in. We don't want to sell. I don't want to get rid of my properties. I love taking care of my properties. To be honest, my tenants, when I said my tenants are generous, they really are. When there was a pandemic, my tenant gave me the bottles of Lysol because we talked and I mentioned I haven't gotten any because everything was gone. So they're really great tenants. I don't want to get rid ever of my properties, but if I don't get paid, if I'm facing bankruptcy, I will have to, just like many landlords have had to do.
Thank you very much. How much time do you have to share?
10 seconds.
10 seconds. Thank you, Teresa. Thank you for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Almeida.
And we heard from Teresa, who's a small landlord who sounds like a great landlord, and honestly, I wish I had her for one. But do you think it's fair as well that these big landlords are allowed to abuse our system to such an extent that it's actually the small landlords like Teresa that end up suffering from the bad reputation that the sector gets as a whole?
MPP Morrison, unfortunately, your time is up.
Thank you. Do you think that idea of a rent subsidy is something that would help you as a small landlord to make sure that your tenants who've lost their income are still able to pay the rent?
Definitely, that is something that many small landlords requested via social media. BC implemented that, and definitely even able to open the Landlord and Tenant Board because there may not be as many evictions as Ontario is facing. Money or subsidies going directly to the landlord will ensure that we can continue to provide the service that is needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that we've heard from tenants in the same panel today that are really struggling with some of the worst actors in terms of landlords in the system. Do you think it's fair that you're treated the same way as some of these big bad landlords in the system, or do you think that we need better protections for small landlords as well?
I do believe we need more protections. To be honest, at some point, I had to stop doing anything on social media because it was literally hurting me mentally, even though it is not my tenants and I know it is not directly on me. But the fact that landlords are gold everywhere under the book, it is terrible. And sometimes I tell my friends, and not all of them know I'm a landlord, and then I tell them, and in the past I've been asked, so I guess you're a slumlord. And this is coming from my friends because the media is
Thank
putting
you,
that in the
Ms. Almira, for your time.
Thank you.
Now we will go to the government side. MPP Martin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for coming. We're always learning more as we go along here from everybody's experiences. Of course, we've all been tenants at one point in our lives. If we're not currently still, some of us are. And most of us haven't had the experience of being landlords, but I've certainly been to the Landlord and Tenant Tribunal, Ms. Almeida, working with friends of mine who had tenancy issues and were there, including my own mother. I do want to say as well, by way of statement, that of course we value artists, even conservatives value artists, and I am sporting today local artisanal fashion from one of my local artists who had a street sale last summer when you could do things like that of her jewelry. So we do support artists, and we want to see artists be able to thrive in the city as well, and we want to make the city more affordable. And all of our policies are geared toward making sure we get more rental housing built, so that there is more competition for rental housing, and also in part through this act, trying to make a balance between landlords and tenants in the Landlord and Tenant Board, so it is fair to everybody. We can't afford to lose the good landlords like Ms. Almeida, or we'll only have the big ones left, and some of them obviously have some questions about some of their practices. We want to keep good landlords in the system, and we want to see properties rented. My riding is in the middle of the city in Eglinton Lawrence, and there are so many empty properties here because most landlords that I've spoken with have told me it's not worth renting out those properties. And that is a big problem. But since our government has come to office, my understanding is the vacancy rate in Toronto has increased, and rents have gone down 5.7%. That's according to Urbanation, was the source I found just while I was preparing here for that. So there is some hope for prices to go down, and really that's where our policies are directed. That and trying to make everybody obey the law at the Landlord and Tenant Board, so things go well. And we're open certainly to good ideas about how we can make the process go better. So we have a number of changes in the legislation that's in front of us, Bill 184, with a view to trying to operate more efficiently at the Landlord and Tenant Board and to resolve disputes in a more timely manner. And I know Ms. Almeida said that this is important to her, and I think it is important to landlords. And I dare say it's probably important to tenants as well, who don't want to waste their time going to the tribunal when they don't have to. And I know you touched on a couple of things, Ms. Almeida, but for example, we have the statement, you may have mentioned this, that parties are required to provide advance notice of other issues before an eviction hearing for non-payment of rent. And of course, this is geared at making sure that the hearing proceeds and doesn't get adjourned and rescheduled months later because dates are hard to come by. And I'm a lawyer, and so this idea of advance notice is really a principle of fundamental justice, that you know when you go somewhere what issues you're going to be addressing. So Ms. Almeida, could you please just talk about how that is important for you as a landlord and how you think that will help everybody?
I think it's really key. We already face up to 6 months wait, and this is pre-COVID time. By knowing in advance what the adjudicator is going to have to deal with, everybody can prepare better. Even the adjudicator will not have to take recess to find out what to do with the specific situations, or at least he will be able to even order the landlord to take care of these items. And sometimes, you know what, it happens that we don't know. Sometimes it's just not bad faith. We just don't know, or we just don't know how bad it can be. So if we know in advance, then we can take care of the items at hand. And to be honest, sometimes what I see, especially in social media, there are a lot of tenant groups, and they actively encourage for tenants to use maintenance issues as a last recourse just to delay a hearing. When I've been to the landlord and tenant board just to as a witness, some of the forms, some of the applications take the entire day. That is unbelievable. And then they get postponed and they have to reschedule. So the tenant took a whole day's worth of work. Many of the tenants that are waiting the time in court and that deserve the time in court are not getting it because it was all taken by delays after delays. And then the landlord continues to pile up debt because they're not getting paid. So it's definitely something that we need to be able to streamline. And it's not a matter of evicting. Remember, we're not evicting that single mom that is delayed for 1 week. We're not evicting that senior person that maybe they got the check late. We're trying to get our property back from the people who are taking months and months and not wanting to work a payment plan with the landlord. We are always open to work with the tenants and try to recover costs. Ultimately, as a
Thank you,
business, we have
Ms.
to.
Almeida. The time is up. Now we will go to our third and last round of questioning. We will start with the opposition. MPP Morrison, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I'll go back to Ms. Almeida. You know, one of the things that I think we've heard from the tenants is that, you know, they're facing, you know, really a lot of issues with the big bad landlords that unfortunately give your profession a bad name, who, you know, aren't like you, who are the folks that will evict those single moms who are a day late and $1 short, and don't have that kind of compassion. And so, you know, what I would, I think my question to you is, you know, would a solution to the backlogs that you've experienced at the board perhaps be better addressed through properly funding the landlord and tenant board and ensuring we have enough adjudicators so that cases can be heard quickly? I know we've seen an issue with a lack of adjudicator appointments at the landlord and tenant board that are causing significant delays. And I know I've personally called on the minister to appoint adjudicators so that hearings can actually get their day in court. Do you think a better solution is to properly fund and staff the landlord and tenant board so that hearings can happen quickly rather than stripping away protections from tenants who you know, are dealing with the Achilleuses and the Starlights of the world? Would that be an acceptable outcome to you as a small landlord?
To be honest, it will be very helpful, but to be honest, I don't think that it will address the issue. And I'll tell you why. I double checked the stats while I was waiting, and it's actually over 90% of applications due to non-payment. You will have to hire a whole bunch of adjudicators. It's just not fiscally possible sometimes to just have that amount of people. What I'm hoping, and we will see with time, is that if we get to mediate, if we get to work with the tenants before we even get to that point, again, even for the big bad landlords, if they are out, but they are out there, then get them to mediate and get them to give these tenants an opportunity. That's what the mediation is about. It's really not about getting that person out on the first day of non-payment of rent.
And
We
would you
really
say-
just.
Oh,
Sorry, go ahead.
Do you think that if we had higher accountability standards for these giant corporate landlords, that you know, it would you know, give your profession as a whole a better name if we were able to hold those bad actors better accountable?
I think it will help to have a little bit of a differentiation between the small landlords and what the big $1 million corporations are. Even corporations can be small landlords as well. Sometimes we just have to do it because it's more of a tax or liability way of protecting ourselves a little bit more, not because we are big. So I think it will help to have some differentiation.
Yeah.
But to be honest, ultimately rent needs to be paid.
Now we will go to the government side. Who's next? MPP Hogarth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to everybody who's spent some time today and took some time off work to share their perspective on this legislation that is extremely important moving forward. I know Ms. Martins chatted a little bit, discussed about some things around this bill. And the reason why we have this bill is to make renting easier and fair for both the tenants and the landlords. And some of our proposed changes to the Ontario rental rules will make it easier to be a landlord while enhancing protections for tenants to make life more affordable. As you've mentioned, we do need to make life a little bit more affordable for all. And people need housing, and they need affordable housing, and that's a part of supply and demand. And that's why we want to make sure there's more rental units on the market. Now, we've heard from tenants who have been unfairly evicted here even today, and from their homes. And really, your apartment, your rental spot is your home. And that's why we want to make sure that people know that we're increasing the fines. Part of this legislation is increasing the fines and raising compensation and tightening the rules to encourage everyone to follow the law. Now, Ms. Martin, MPP Martin started asking Teresa a question with regard to mediation process, and you didn't get to finish. I would just actually want to hear your thoughts, because you're the first landlord I've had the opportunity to question. And what Bill 184 is proposing to allow alternative dispute resolution, such as mediation, before the landlord and tenant board hearing. One question she asked is, do you believe this will help reduce the need for hearings and to resolve disputes? And do you have any advice on how to better inform parties of options to help make sure mediation is effective for both the tenants and the landlord? Because it really needs to be a win-win for both.
I definitely agree there needs to be a win-win for both, because we do not want the lack of knowledge or the lack of education to be the reason why a good tenant gets kicked out just to make more money. So one of the things that I have noticed and that I think will help is to also sort of keep up with the times. The landlord and tenant board doesn't really use email as communication, and it relies a lot on mail. Mail can be lost. Sometimes tenants have to stay somewhere else, and they don't get the information needed on time. A little bit more education all across the board is also important. I've noticed that even small landlords that have acted incorrectly have done so out of ignorance and not out of bad faith. I belong to a couple of landlord groups, and we try to help each other and point out what the law says and how we need to act so that they don't become another bad landlord that tenants complain about. So, and in terms with the mediation, I think just as somebody was touching base on having enough adjudicators, we just need to be prepared for having the capacity to attend to all the mediation requests, because there will be a lot. We have quite a few months of backlog, and honestly, sometimes it's just not fast enough.
I appreciate that. And just so you know, we are adding more adjudicators to that board to ensure that we have, as we know, there is a backlog. And I believe the number is 17 or 18, but I stand corrected if that number is incorrect. So we are adding more people to that board, because we do believe that'll make a difference. So thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you very much for all three presenters.